one of the hottest topics right now is the US government's push towards most favored nation, or MFN pricing. I think this has the potential to significantly shape up how pharmaceutical pricing works, not just in the US, but globally. In simple terms, MFN pricing would link US drug prices to the lowest prices paid in other wealthy countries. So really introducing international reference pricing, or IRP, into the US. And if implemented, this could really reshape how companies plan product launches, manage pricing, and approach access strategy across international markets. In terms of the immediate financial impact of MFN pricing, the US has long been one of the biggest markets for pharmaceutical companies. So if MFN does tie US pricing to lower international benchmarks, it could quickly and significantly impact revenue. And to offset US revenue losses and mitigate lower price exposure, companies may try to raise products in EU markets, but also that again could trigger pushback and further policy changes. There may well also be considerations for withdrawing products from lower price markets if prices can't be raised to prevent those prices being used to set US levels. Ultimately, this kind of revenue pressure can really hamper investment in R&D and ultimately slow innovation across the board. I think the other major impact we could see on global market access would be in terms of product launches and the sequencing of those launches. And ultimately, to avoid setting a low benchmark that could be referenced back into the US, companies may choose to delay launches in lower price countries, prioritize those higher price markets, or even choose not to launch in certain geographies altogether. And again, this could significantly limit access in markets with tighter price constraints, and especially in those lower income countries. I think we're also likely to see some companies reconsider ex-US launch plans. So in those countries that might qualify as MFN reference markets, which could have a global effect again. So whilst this policy is driven by the US administration, I think the ripple effects could really reshape how and where new therapies are introduced globally. Now, I think it's important to note that this policy is still evolving, and whilst technically active, it does face legal challenges and lacks some clarity on how it will be implemented. Industries raise concerns around the feasibility, the fairness, and any unintended consequences. But I think what is clear is that the US is no longer a passive participant in global pricing, and that shift is already sending ripples through the international landscape. In terms of for you guys on the call today, as we think about that broader impact of MFN pricing, I think it's clear that market access teams will need to take an even more globally coordinated approach when launching products. This will mean including the US when conducting IRP exercises and potentially rethinking launch sequencing and early wave markets entirely. For example, prioritizing those high price markets ahead of the lower priced ones. I think at the same time, managing exposure does become critical. So companies should really be thinking about how you model MFN linked US reference pricing and how that could affect global forecasts and revenue as well. So a key part of that is minimizing the visibility of lower international prices that could be referenced back into the US. But I think finally, it's important to note that this is still evolving. And I think one of the key considerations is really just to keep abreast of everything that's going on, continue that scenario planning. This is a moving target, but I think definitely one to watch. So even some small steps now can make a big difference in the longer term, depending on how prepared companies are for whatever policy changes lie ahead.